Om Tavakatam Ritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravana Mangalam Shri Madatatam Bhuvinguranantiye Burita Janaha. The nectar of your words, the praise of poet-seers, elixir to parched souls, delight to listening ears. Cleanser of all sins is great and glorious. They who spread it far and wide on earth are most generous. Good evening, friends. Tonight, we will continue reading from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And up until now, Ram Krishna has been given the most attention. Swami Krishna gave him specific teachings, and now he's about to leave, and so now we will start on a newer topic, but it's the same day. It looks like Swami Krishna had a busy time that day, because many visitors came by. So he says, about 9:30 in the morning, Ram Krishna took his leave of the Master. Soon afterwards, a minstrel sang some devotional songs to the accompaniment of a stringed instrument. The Master was listening to the songs when Kedar Chatterjee, a householder devotee, entered the room clad in his office clothes. He was a man of devotional temperament and cherished the attitude of the gopis of Vrindavan. Words about God would make him weep. Well, he would weep out of joy. Any mention of God, he felt, awakened his sense of devotion, his love to God. So the sight of Kedar awakened in the Master's mind the episode of Vrindavan in Sri Krishna's life. Intoxicated with this divine love, the Master stood up and sang, addressing Kedar, "Tell me, friend, how far is the grove where Krishna, my beloved, dwells? His fragrance reaches me even here, but I am tired and can walk no farther." So there are two classes of songs that are devoted to Sri Krishna. There's a type of song like this where it basically describes the Leela of Krishna, the story of daily events, and another version of songs that describes one's longing for Krishna, to experience God, to have his presence. So here this is considered in some ways an inferior form of song, but yet it gives the listener a visual of that event. And in the case of someone like Kedar, these songs almost put him in the presence of Vrindavan. So he feels inspired by that. So Swami Krishna is singing now a song, basically just about describing not so much the yearning that one has, but just the series of events. Just as when he narrates in the Gospel it was a sunny day, the sunset looked beautiful, the moonlight, so he sets it's more like a romantic setting before you start with the main teachings. So this was only part of the song, but now the Gospel continues. Sri Ramakrishna assumed the attitude of Sri Radha to Krishna and went into deep samadhi while singing the song. He stood there, still as a picture on canvas, with tears of divine joy running down his cheeks. So for many of us, we need to hear the songs to be inspired by topics of yearning and so forth. But here, just the very mention of the story brings about a sense of love and devotion, because the meaning behind it is more subtle, such that it has now reminded you of love for Krishna. So not so much the description, but that sense of remembrance, and then that remembrance inspires you. Oh, yes, that yearning, that love, that intense love that one has for Krishna. So even that a song like this inspired Sri Ramakrishna and inspired that sense of yearning and longing and love. So the master went into samadhi while singing the song. He stood there, still as a picture on canvas. He was in samadhi, but his body was not in any motion. There's just tears running down his cheeks. Seeing this, Kedar knelt before the master, and touching his feet, Kedar chanted a hymn. Now Kedar would see Sri Krishna in Ramakrishna. That's why he felt inspired to prostrate before him and touched his feet. And so he chanted a hymn. We worship the Brahman consciousness in the lotus of the heart, the undifferentiated who is adored by Hari, Hara, and Brahma, who is attained by yogis in the depths of their meditation, the scatterer of the fear of birth and death, the essence of knowledge and truth, the primal seed of the world. So when Kedar felt inspired to chant this hymn, he obviously felt that Sri Ramakrishna was Krishna, and Krishna was the world, was God. And so, but not just God in the form, but also God as the formless. So he had a much deeper understanding of Krishna than just the story of Vrindavan. So after a time, the master regained consciousness of the relative world. Soon Kedar took his leave and returned to his office in Calcutta. At midday, Ramlal brought the master. Ramlal was a nephew of the master, and he was also one of the pujaris at the temple garden. He brought the master a plate of food that had been offered in the Kali temple. And like a child, he ate a little of everything. Later in the afternoon, several Marwari devotees entered the master's room, where Rakhal and M also were seated. So Marwaris are merchants, and often they would drop in to meet Sri Ramakrishna. I don't know if it's the same Marwari devotees that we hear about throughout the gospel, but apparently M just knew them as devotees. He didn't know their names, so they perhaps were not regulars. But one of them asked, "Sir, what is the way?" The master replied, "There are two ways. One is the path of discrimination, the other is that of love." So he's now describing Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, and the path of bhakti, the path of love. So discrimination means to know the distinction between the real and the unreal. God alone is the real and permanent substance. All else is illusory and impermanent. The magician alone is real, his magic is illusory. This is discrimination. So discrimination, on one hand, means following the path of knowledge, using reasoning. But here, this was just an example because it's the act of the mind trying to reason out, trying to determine what is the true nature of something. So the act of that thinking process is called discrimination. It doesn't mean you're discriminating against people or this or that. It's how the mind discriminates between what is real, what is unreal, what is permanent, what is transitory. But this seems to be a pretty tall order at the beginning, because how does anyone know that the world is illusory and God is real? If that is the first teaching in the path of discrimination, where is the conviction that God is real and the world is illusory? So, if that is the path that you are following, then initially you have to feel that, well, okay, then if God is real, how do I know He's real? I haven't experienced it. So my options are either I have faith in the scriptures, or I have faith and reliable testimony by some saint that I have revered, or trust, understanding that they have no ulterior motive in whatever they are teaching me. So there must be more truth behind their words, and they have their life behind the words. Or we have had some experience of something that is greater than ourselves, that has given us some preliminary faith that yes, there is a God. And you feel that from that experience, you feel, no, there must be something more real in that experience than the transitory nature of this world. We know that life is only for a particular period of time. We know that our attachments to one thing also, we can become greatly attached to something, or we become detached to something. Our emotions are always, we can be happy, we can be sad. Everything is moving in a transitory nature. So we do not feel, we understand intellectually things are transitory. But how do we maintain that? Because today I might feel like I'm thinking that way. The next day, mind is not so keen on reasoning. So, and the Master, Sri Ramakrishna, will continue to explain how that works, what to do. But initially he's saying that, okay, the magician alone is real, his magic is illusory. So, in an illusion, the magician will be there creating all kinds of fantastic things. We get great enjoyment watching the magician's illusion. We even get involved in it. We think, oh, wow, this looks so great, this looks so real. And you're amazed by it, you're drawn into it. And then the magic is over, and you realize nothing was real about that illusion at all. All that remained was, the only real thing there was that magician. So Sri Ramakrishna is trying to tell us that through this path of discrimination, even this transitory world that we experience so vividly will disappear like the magic of a magician, and all that will remain is the magician, and that God is this great magician. And so then we should look at the magician. And if you watch a magic trick or a magic illusion, and the whole time while watching that illusion, you concentrate on the magician, trying to find out, well, how does he do that? How is he doing this? Well, you're discriminating, and you won't find any joy in the magic. You'll find joy in the skill that this magician has and being able to create this illusion. But the illusion itself will not fascinate you as much as the skill of the magician. And at that point, you'll actually start to love the fact that this magician can fool so many so easily that even you, if you let down your guard, will be fooled. But sometimes it's hard to differentiate the two, because through his ability to distract, you miss certain things, and so you get drawn into the illusion. This is the same way that God is allowing this Maya to be this illusion that draws us into this world to the point where we don't even see God, but we see aspects of God in perhaps like Sri Ramakrishna or those that try to convince us through so many stories, through their lives, through their teachings, that God is more real than this world. That they must have experienced or know something to be able to say that with such conviction. So that becomes the preliminary step that we can start from to determine about what is real and what is unreal. Now the problem is when we start looking at this world and start saying what is real and unreal, the objects that we're trying to determine that are unreal are the objects that we are so deeply attached to. So that is where Sri Ramakrishna now continues, and he says, discrimination and renunciation. Discrimination means to know the distinction between the real and the unreal. Renunciation means to have dispassion for the things of the world. One cannot acquire all of them. One cannot acquire them all of a sudden. They must be practiced every day. One should renounce lust and greed mentally at first. Then, by the will of God, one can renounce it both mentally and outwardly. It is impossible to ask the people of Calcutta to renounce all for the sake of God. One must tell them to renounce mentally. So discrimination means to know the distinction between the real and the unreal. So understanding that the object of this world, the object of our attachment, if intellectually we can say, well, this and these things are unreal. But if after saying that we still have attachment to it, then we are not convinced. And so with continued practice, it starts out slowly. We live in the world. As we develop this passion for something, we no longer find joy. We no longer find our attachments diminish. But that comes with, as I said, with repeated practice. So it's something we do every day. It's slow. It's also, but we have to do it patiently. If we are in the habit, if we want everything to happen all of a sudden, in this world we want immediate gratification, well, that's not going to happen in spiritual life. Because, yes, you might think, oh, I'm going to renounce this and this so quickly. And if you think that's the only time you're going to think of that object, it has already made such a deep impression in your mind over time that, okay, yeah, maybe you won't think about that object for a week or two, but then it comes back to your mind. At first it's a little seed. Oh, I thought, and then you think, well, I didn't think that seed was going to be, I was going to remember that. But then the longer you dwell on it, the more it comes to the forefront of your mind. And then you realize, well, maybe I will have some ice cream, once in a while won't hurt. And, but then Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, but renounce mentally. For sannyasis, they are supposed to renounce mentally and outwardly. But for the householder, he recommends just mentally. In other words, just practice. Practice this renunciation, and but you also sometimes have to scold your mind. Yes, something, you may try something and you realize you might like rashagola. You might say, well, let me have a rashagola. But you might say for a while, oh, I don't want to eat rashagola because it's sweet, it's not good for me. But still, the temptation, the desire is there. So now if you want to practice mental renunciation, okay, let me try this Rasgulla. But the whole time you're tasting it, you're discriminating. Well, this is what the Rasgulla tastes like. This is what it feels like in the mouth. Oh, this is how sweet it is. But then you realize that after you've swallowed it, the taste is gone. So now you've tasted it for what, 10 seconds? And maybe this thought has bothered you for maybe an hour. You've been ruminating over whether you should have a Rasgulla or not, but the satisfaction is gone in 10 seconds that you just tasted this. So then you start scolding yourself. I wasted all my time for 1 hour over this 10 seconds of satisfaction. That was a waste of my time. That kind of scolding and reinforcement that, no, that's one way of mental renunciation. And then you can go on further and say, well, if that's all I get out of it, then it's not worth it. It's not worth me ruminating over it. And then what is a Rasgulla? Well, you might say, well, okay, too many of them, even one after the other. What will that satisfy? You'll only feel sick after, or it will not satiate you. So why continue one Rasgulla after the other? So just terminate it after that one Rasgulla and call it done and move on. But sometimes the thought comes sometime later, oh, you see a Rasgulla at the next banquet or something, and you feel, well, a whole year gone by, not a single Rasgulla, maybe I'll try again. But at that moment, you try to recall the thought processes you had. Say, well, it's only 10 seconds of satisfaction. Maybe it's not worth it. So that's the process. But that's just a Rasgulla. What about all the other attachments we have in life? One after the other. And that's where patience is required. And you have to be ever vigilant, because those desires come with every moment. The moment I turn away from one desire, I look over there, oh, there's another desire. Whether it's an object or whether it's some action you want to perform, or whether it's the remembering of some activity you have to do out of sense of duty, your job, that kind of thing. So there'll be one thing after the other. So that is done through practice every day. Want to renounce lust and gold mentally at first. So you'll abstain from selfish desires. Sri Ramakrishna says it's not harmful to satisfy small desires. Rasgulla would be considered a small desire, but bigger desires will be like intense lustfulness or things that will actually ruin your spiritual life. A sense of greed. But all of that comes from the attachment that you want to make something your own. So what you're really renouncing in the end is your ego, that desire to own things. Because even Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that if some obstacle comes in front of a desire and that obstacle is immovable, it won't let you achieve your desire, you'll get angry at it. You'll express anger. And if still that desire cannot be achieved with your expression of anger, you'll get confused memory. You'll start acting irrationally. And if that happens and you can't overcome that, then that's basically you're ruined. Ruined means, that doesn't mean there's no hope. That just means that either you finally realize the transitoriness of everything, or you end up in a mental institution, or suffer from depression because the world has said no, and you've never heard no before in your life. Your parents never said no, your teacher never said no, you've never heard no growing up. When you start hearing that as an adult, you'll start thinking the whole world's against you, and you'll end up with depressed or some other mental illnesses. But if you've heard no and you understand that there are limitations to how far one's desires should be executed, then it'll be easier for you to say no to your own mind when something could be harmful. You know that you don't put your hand in fire just because it looks beautiful, because you've done that as a child, and you've experienced what happens with that. Well, there are a lot of other worldly desires that are just like the fire, but they are not as obvious as the fire. The effect might happen over time. But if you've watched how other people have suffered following your path of trying to satisfy those desires, then you can learn from them. So he also mentions that one needs dispassion. The renunciation means dispassion for something. Well, sometimes people feel they want to renounce something, or they feel that they should follow the path of renunciation. But then they do that not so much out of firm belief that they should renounce something, but they do it out of frustration for not having success in life. So, because real renunciation is you're giving up something out of love for something higher. You've experienced something that gives you more joy and satisfaction than anything in the world. And when that happens, you develop an intense love for that higher joy. So real renunciation is associated with love. The kind of a renunciation that one gets when one feels frustrated by not giving up the world and say, oh, to hell with that. That is based on frustration because you cannot satisfy a desire. And that is not real renunciation. And if you persist in that, you will only end up with being depressed about the world. And being depressed about the world and then claiming renunciation is not real renunciation. So, and that is following the path of discrimination. God gave us a brain and some rationales to think. And so we should use that, not follow blindly what we are being told, because we have to start from where we are. Certain things make sense today, but they won't make sense. They may not make sense to me today, but they may make sense to me later. But still, if I hear these things, then they'll be in the back of my mind. And I should not just say, just because someone says God exists, well, yeah, you could say God exists, but how many people are going to believe such a statement unless you have something to back it up or they have had some experience? So with experience, you find you can believe more in the scriptures. You can say, oh yes, what Sri Ramakrishna says is true. If one does overcome lust and greed, one will realize God. That's the greatest obstacle that we have to overcome, to realize God as a householder, as a monk, as a human being. So, and since God has given us that sense of reason and ability to think deeply, it seems to me that he wants us to realize him somehow, somewhere. Not that he wants to see us languishing in the world, suffering needlessly. We have a brain, and we should use it to the best of our ability. I will conclude there today because it actually goes deeper into this, and I will resume from there next time. If you have any questions, you can think about them now while I give the announcements. Every evening at 6 p.m., we have Arti here in Seattle. It is in person only, not live streamed. And tomorrow evening at 7 p.m., Swami Brahmatmananda, who is my brother monk, stays at our retreat property in Tapovan, will be giving a class online via Google Meet on the book Towards the Goal Supreme. This coming Friday, Swami Nikhilananda will be continuing in his class on self-knowledge. He's referring to a book, translation of Atmabodha, meaning self-knowledge. It's a work of Shankaracharya. He'll be giving a class on that this Friday at 7 p.m. This will be part 4 of the class. And this Saturday at 10 a.m. at the retreat will be a Karma Yoga day. It might be raining, so bring some outdoor clothing. You might be working indoors, who knows? It's whatever Swami Brahmatmananda comes up with that day. And this Sunday, Swami Satyamananda will be giving a talk on the title, The Unique Swami Yogananda. I believe that this week, one of the days will be his birthday. And so on Sunday, we will be celebrating that birthday by giving the talk. And there will be a Mother's Children that day for the parents who have children. If they bring their children 10 minutes before the hour, they can bring them to their respective teachers. So I will now conclude with a chant. There don't seem to be any questions, unless there are any in the audience, but yes?
So when someone renounces an object out of frustration, as you mentioned, the desire still lingers in his head.
Yes.
So he hasn't technically renounced it.
That's right. So from the audience, one of our attendees has mentioned that when one renounces out of frustration, one has not really renounced because the thought is still in their head to enjoy that object. So that's not real renunciation. So in a sense, that is self-deception, but he may call it renunciation. Yes, thank you for the clarification. So thank you all very much for attending, and we'll see you next week, or 2 weeks from now. Because next week, Swami Satyamananda will be continuing on his series. He's referring to a book on the devotional teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. So this class is on alternate weeks, and so is his class. So thank you. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampa Tritavigraham Vaye Ishavataram Paramesamityam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We salute that Ramakrishna.